in your disclosure where you say, remind people of how strong a year we're coming off of, but look at the challenges ahead. Any sort of paint a picture for us of where that's coming from, Mark?
Yeah, so Caroline, so yes, on one hand, we had a very soft Q3. At the same time, this will be the second best year in a 111-year history. I think why we believe a Q3 is not reflective of our structural margin run rate is you have in Q3 and to some extent Q4, you have two very unusual events coming together at the same time. One is you have two macro cycles which are right now out of sync. And what I mean with that, you have demand already fully impacted by the recessionary environment, but cost is still stubbornly high. And usually these trends follow each other. So it's very unusual also if you look back in history to have these cycles completely not in sync. If it happened in the past, it typically didn't last very long. And the second element is because we saw a very, very volatile demand environment, and frankly, we also saw consumer sentiment really dropping off pretty much in June, July. We took strong, you could even say draconian actions on our production volumes. So we cut our production 35% year over year. Frankly, we've never done that before, but we just didn't want to enter an uncertain period with an inventory overhang. So
talk to me about, a little bit of that inventory in the comments, if I heard you correctly, about the demand side pricing in a full-blown recession. What is your visibility into demand? What does that look like?
Yeah, so Taylor, what we pretty much saw throughout the world, US, but pretty much all major global markets have been down -10 to -25% in Q3. So these are pretty strong levels. And keeping in mind, we're not coming off particular high demand levels from last year. So what happened, if you dig a little bit deeper, is we saw in particular in the US, but also in other markets, we saw consumer sentiment dropping off massively in June, July. What it impacted is, we typically look at demand and replacement demand and discretionary demand. Replacement demand is pretty stable, even growing, but the consumer sentiment impacted discretionary demand, and that significantly weakened throughout the Q3. And frankly, we see similar patterns in Q4. So we saw the demand already dropping off recession, but the cost not yet dropping off.
And to that point, therefore, can you pass on those costs to the consumer? How inflationary do you have to be within your price point, or do you have to take it internally, Mark?
Yeah, so basically what we just also remind everyone, we took overall 7 price increases over the last 2 years. And even in this third quarter, we have more than 5 points of positive pricing. And again, that comes on top of all the previous pricing initiatives. So we feel we took very strong and proactive actions on the pricing side. But I think what we are now focusing on in particular is on managing down the cost. And that is not just waiting for the raw materials to come down. We initiated also an additional cost takeout program internally that is about $500 million, which we want to realize next year. So we're taking a very aggressive stance on managing down the cost on top of preserving what we've already done on the pricing side.
Talk to me about use of cash. You mentioned in the press release returning cash to shareholders back in 2021 since then, but also pursuing value-creating M&A. What is that?
Yeah, so what we've done actually over the last 2 or 3 years, we've done significant amount of share buybacks, and we feel these were the right use of cash. And what we've also been doing in Q3, and we expect to close that now, actually in a couple of days from now, is we acquired the InSinkErator business from Emerson Electric. That is a hugely attractive strategic business for us because it fits perfect into our vision of improving life at home and winning in the kitchen. It's the #1 player with more than 70% market share in the US, and that's where we invested a lot of capital behind this one. Now, obviously, given that we're very prudent on our balance sheet, that also means we temporarily paused our share buybacks as we kind of wanted to pay down the additional debt.